So let's scroll down to the bottom where we actually start running some of the code. So when the page loads, first what's going to happen is we're going to create a new page object. And we do that with the new keyword and then the name of the class. And then we pass it whatever parameters are needed. So what this is called is an instantiation of the class. Something that might help you think about classes in a way that makes a bit more sense is that classes are just a different type of variable. So just like you can create a new array or a new string, you can create a new object of various types. In this case, we're creating a new page. So it's a page class, but the class generates objects. So this page variable here is actually a page object that's been generated by the page class. So if you were starting to feel confused about what the difference between a class and an object are, it's just basically that the class generates the object. And we could create new page objects here. We could create 10 of them in a row by just specifying a variable and saying new page. And we could pass it different items. Each instance of the page, that's where the word instantiation comes from. It's an instance. Instantiation is just creating an instance of. Each instance of it will have access to its own properties and its own methods. Okay, so we instantiate this page class, and let's see what happens when we do that. If we scroll up to the page class here, the first thing that happens is 3 different variables get set that will be available to us within this instance. So we have settings, title, and output. Next, the constructor gets called, and it's the one that collects the parameters that get passed to the class. So we passed it settings and title. And in order for our other methods to have access to these parameters, we need to set them as properties inside of the class. So we use the this keyword, and this just simply says this instance of the page class, and the dash right arrow specifies a relationship between this object and either a property or a method. Methods will have parentheses just like functions do. Properties won't. So it's saying this settings, and this settings already exists because we specified it up here. Now up here we didn't use the this keyword, but setting this property here enables us to use it within the methods. So we're saying that this settings equals, and then this parameter that got passed called settings. And then we do the same thing with title. At this point, these 2 variables are available to us in any of the other methods inside of this class. It's very similar to using a static keyword in a function. It persists throughout this script. So that's one kind of nice thing about working with properties in classes is that the properties actually belong to it. Again, there's an explicit relationship there that we can't specify using just normal functions. So that's all that happens when we instantiate the class. Let's scroll down. So now we have our page variable. It's captured a couple of these parameters as properties within the object. And next what we're going to do is run the build method on our page object. So you see we're using the dash arrow again. And you can tell this is a method because it's got the parentheses like a function does. And we can pass parameters to our methods as well this way, but the build method doesn't take any. Let's take a look at what happens when we run it. So we scroll up to build inside of our page class, and it's going to loop through each of the settings. So notice that even though we instantiated the class on one line and we're running the build method on the next line, we still have the settings parameter available to us. Now the code in here is actually pretty similar to our previous build page function. We switch based on the type and we build out the content. Notice that we're using an output property here that we specified up at the top to gather the content as we build it. We also do it when we build out the form. That means that when it comes to theming, when we run the theme method, if we scroll down to the bottom, you see that our last line here is running page theme. I'm going to scroll up. You see we can use that property and the title property without passing it directly to the theme method. That's pretty cool, and it has some major advantages. I'm sure you've run into a time where you've written some code and something was wrong with it and you couldn't figure out what. And eventually you found out that you had overwritten a variable that you had already specified. Variable names like output or ID are really easy to use because they're so descriptive. But sometimes we end up using them and then forgetting that they're being used for something else, and we override it, and it's really hard to track that down. But because all of our variables are encapsulated inside of our class, we don't have to worry about that kind of thing happening nearly as much. So that's another advantage of going with the object-oriented structure.